Part 89. Holy Dragon Totem. Author, Fengqing Yang. Chapter 883. Everyone gathered together and began to listen to the elders. The Du Shenhuang stood at the head, and the specific details of the Shenhuang banquet were explained by Yu Shenjun. It was mainly about some rules of the competition and some etiquette issues. After all, as the host, the Shenhuang Palace must have a way of hospitality. While showing itself, it must also show the demeanor of the first sect. Now it is basically certain that the Shenhuang will descend on the Shenhuang Palace after the 7th, so the banquet will be prepared after the 7th. You must perform well. First, to win glory for my Shenhuang Palace. As the first force in the God realm, we must have extraordinary achievements. Second, this is good news for you. The Shenhuang informed me yesterday that he will focus on the performance of this generation of young disciples. Once he meets someone who is recognized by him, he will reward him with treasures and fortunes that are important enough. You need to understand the meaning that he and I emphasize. I don't want our Shenhuang Palace to get less of this kind of treasures and fortune than others. We are the direct descendants of the Shenhuang. When Yu Shenjun was almost finished, the Du Shenhuang spoke in a serious tone and emphasized it. The God King personally emphasized that Zhang Zizai could hear something extraordinary. They all thought it would be an important reward. What exactly would it be? This made people look forward to it. This Ming had the motivation to perform hard at the God King feast this time, and he was ready. Now there is only one true God King in the God realm. During this worship, the important reward he took out was enough to make all the disciples crazy. Understood, the disciples' eyes were fiery and full of confidence, including Xuanhuan and Xuanhuan. At the level of ancient gods, their sisters have great competitiveness because of their extraordinary talents, especially Xuanhuan. Because of her age, she will definitely have the biggest advantage. She is currently the oldest ancient god in the entire god realm. I am not too worried about the ancient gods, but on the mortal side, because 11Er has become an ancient god, it has become the weakest among all forces, the God King said. At present, there is indeed no amazing person like Xuanhuan in the God King Palace. Among them, there are 2 or 3 who are in the 9th level of the initial God realm and have God Lord level totems, but their God Lord level totems are relatively ordinary and definitely not as competitive as Chu Ci and others. A yellow-robed young man said, God King, rest assured, we will do our best to perform and win glory for the God King Palace. Zhang Zizai knew the man who said this. His name is, Lin Zikan, the grandson of the Kun God King next to the capital God King. His father is just an ordinary ancient god and has no potential to become a God King, but this Lin Zikan is very good. He just turned 21 today and is considered the strongest combat force below the ancient god in the God King Palace, except for Xuanhuan. His totem seems to be the 9-level Earth Xuanhuan totem. The so-called Xuanhuan is a more powerful beast totem than the Xuanhuan totem, and it is the evolution of the Xuanhuan totem. You can probably be about the same as Chu Yang of the Holy Emperor Gate, but you are 2 years older than him. In terms of talent, you are slightly worse, so your performance at that time is very important. Below the ancient gods, you guys are the ones to watch, the capital God King said. Yes. We will definitely fulfill our mission, Lin Zikan took the lead, and a group of people were excited. Dad, Zhang Zizai is not bad either, Xuanhuan couldn't help but say. This sentence was still very abrupt. As everyone knows, the title of God King's son-in-law has spread too far these days. Everyone is here, but as for what God King himself thinks, outsiders don't know yet. Yu Shenjun is still here. His eyes fell on Zhang Zizai, and there was no big change. In fact, there was no change, which made it clearer that he was different. Zhang Zizai had a headache. If he had known that she was going to talk too much, he would have covered her up. He is no worse than Lin Zikan. Xuanhuan saw people's suspicious eyes and quickly added another sentence. This caused some laughter. I guess everyone thought Xuanhuan was a little cute, but after all, it was a serious occasion, so many people laughed and shut up immediately. Oh, then I'm looking forward to his performance. The king of the capital god looked at his daughter, smiled slightly, and then said, "Okay, go back and prepare." The elders left directly, and everyone naturally had to leave the capital palace. Just as they were about to leave, Lin Zihan and several other young men in the 9th level of the initial god realm, including Wei Jing, came up. Yuexi Lin Zihan came forward, glanced at Zhang Zizai, and asked, "Can he really compare with me?" "Are you going to humiliate yourself now?" Su Yuexi said bluntly. "That's not the case. Now is not an opportunity for competition. Anyway, the King of God's feast does not restrict disciples of the same force from fighting. When the time comes, I will choose to learn from Zhang Zizai's high skills," Lin Zihan said. "What are you doing against him?" Su Yuexi asked curiously. "Are you telling the truth?" Lin Zihan asked. "You. We all think he is not worthy of you." He was very straightforward. "You are nosy, you are sick," Su Yuexi cursed, took Zhang Zizai's arm, swaggered, and walked away, leaving a group of teenagers looking at each other in dismay. "Yun Ziao, what is so attractive about Zhang Zizai?" Lin Zihan asked puzzledly. Yun Ziao was about to describe it. In fact, she still liked Zhang Zizai very much. She even felt touched once or twice in the thrilling moments. But when she opened her mouth, she thought of Ning Mufeng, who was still here, so she could only say, "Well, I don't know either. This is Xie's own decision. You should not annoy her. That's not right. She's too weak and easily deceived. Let's show her the true form of Zhang Zizai. Such a humble person is not worth wasting her youth," Lin Zihan said. Yun Ziao shook her head and sighed. "Seventh time will come in a blink of an eye. The God King Palace is already weak in their area, and now they are fighting among themselves. Yun Ziao feels that the future is worrying. After all, everyone knows that it is because 11 became a god that he performed poorly. They shouldn't laugh at us for having no one in the God King Palace," Yun Ziao thought. "Where are you two going?" Su Yunyu caught up with her. Under her glare, Su Yuexi reluctantly let go of Zhang Zizai's hand. "Didn't you hate him just now? Why are you holding hands with him again?" Su Yunyu really didn't know whether to laugh or cry at her moody sister. "God Master, after all, you have to perform well. I want to prepare more." Zhang Zizai changed the subject. "Then prepare well. I will supervise you. Come back to Yunyu Tower with me. As long as I am here, don't even think about touching my sister," Su Yunyu ordered. "That's great. It will save me from being flirted with again." Zhang Zizai smiled. Holy Dragon Totem. Author, Fengqing Yang. Chapter 884. 7 days later, the Feast of the God King officially begins. Before this day, all the invited people have arrived at the God King's palace, and then gathered together in the God King's holy palace on this day. The God King's holy palace is the largest building in the God King's palace, and it is usually forbidden to mess around. When people enter, it will almost only be opened during the Feast of the God King. The holy palace of the God King was naturally extremely lively on this day. As the host, many people from the God King's palace have already decorated the God King's holy palace. It can be said to be splendid and magnificent inside, quite like the palace of a God King. This can be the most sacred place in the divine realm. On the surrounding walls and pillars, there are many reliefs recording the history of the divine realm. People who come here will naturally be affected by this solemn atmosphere and will not dare to make any noise. At present, the holy palace of the God King is divided into several areas. Each area has a large number of tables and chairs, and wine and delicacies have been prepared on the tables and chairs. The uppermost area belongs to the God King's palace, and the other areas are occupied by guests from all major forces. There is also the largest area, which is where the god kings who come as individuals gather. If they have disciples, they can only stand off to the side. After all, young disciples like Zhang Zizai and others have no place. The guests at the God King's feast are basically the God King. This time they are at best just tools to help the God King perform their feast. Even Suyuexi has no place, but she can rely on the God King of the city. During the God King's feast, she must stay with her father. Zhang Zizai stood aside with other disciples, such as Lin Zikan, Yun Ziao, Wei Jing, and others. In addition to the luxurious seats in both places, the most conspicuous thing about the holy palace of the God King is the 9 white high platforms in the center surrounded by the luxurious seats. Those 9 white high platforms are all made of top-notch divine minds. It is polished and exudes rich spiritual energy. Some traces of fighting can be seen on it, but they are basically not deep, which can prove that the material of this sacred mine is absolutely hard. These 9 are also fighting god arenas, but they are much better than the place Zhang Zizai went to before. These 9 fighting god arenas are where they will perform next. When the God King comes, they will strive for the opportunity to perform in these 9 fighting gods. If they accidentally get the God King's gift, they will make a lot of money. Early this morning, the God King Palace asked the disciples to arrive early to greet the guests. Even the high-ranking figures of the God King Palace, including the King of Gods, are already here. The King of Gods is now sitting at the top left position, accompanied by a pair of daughters. Today he is smiling all over his face and is naturally in a good mood. The highest point is a golden seat. When the God King comes, he will definitely appear here. The God King has not yet arrived, and Suyuexi is bored in every possible way. She can only wink at Zhang Zizai quietly. Zhang Zizai is also bored here. After all, among the disciples of the God King Hall, there are too many who reject him because of Suyuexi. Starting from that time, I challenge you. Do you dare to accept it? When he was bored, Lin Zikan came up and asked. Yu Yongmao must be sick. There are so many opponents from other sects in the Divine King's palace. Why are you challenging me? Zhang Zizai said. Don't worry, do you dare or not? Lin Zikan asked, raising his eyebrows. Wait until you perform well. Right now, I don't like you yet, Zhang Zizai said. If everyone had to agree to a challenge, he wouldn't have that much free time. Lin Zikan gave him little desire to fight. It means giving in. It's really despising. Lin Zikan smiled scornfully and left with the people around him. They gathered together and didn't know what they were discussing. At this time, under the welcome and leadership of some ancient gods in the God King's palace, the powerful talents from all forces and the top gods from all sides of the god's domain entered the arena one after another and filed in. They arrived almost at the same time. On the other side, except for the king of the gods, who was sitting calmly, everyone else stood up to welcome the powerful men from all sides to the banquet. The king of gods must have seen them before this. Under his warm hospitality, the entire God King's holy palace was quickly filled to capacity, and basically everyone who was supposed to come had already arrived. There are too many people and complexities, and Zhang Zizai is a little dazzled. He has not yet become a god, and many of the people present are God Kings. He knows better that these are the real powerhouses in this divine realm. In their eyes, Zhang Zizai, Suyuexi, and others, almost no different from a baby. So when they were talking, as seniors, they basically kept silent. Anyway, there would be plenty of opportunities for them to show off. It's not fair. They eat and drink and watch us fight. It's like playing monkeys, Suyuexi had already complained. However, this is the essence of the feast of the God King. They are not partygoers, but tools for the lively atmosphere. Of course, the God King has not yet arrived. Although the feast on the table has been prepared and the wine is ready to be poured, there is absolutely no one who dares to act in advance. The God King is the protagonist today. Their various forces, just like the king of a country where all parties come to pay homage to his son. In addition to the top forces, the number of divine kings who came alone was very large. Although there was only one in their area, they accounted for almost 2/3 of the people. However, there were not many real peak powerhouses and peak talents on their side. Exists, or is it gathered among the top forces? Among them, the Saint Emperor Gate, Yanjai Xinggai and Wang Chuan Sword Tomb are the most numerous, and Dao Demon Sect can barely be counted among them. After all, there are only so many quasi-god kings in the god realm. There are only these 4 forces plus the 5 god kings in the God King Palace. Therefore, their seats are the most forward and the most noble. Zhang Zizai also watched these peak ancient gods, such as the Holy Emperor of the Holy Emperor section. He was a figure he had heard of in the Totem world. The Holy Emperor Totem world worshipped him. He remembered that Zhang Fanchen, who was defeated in the ancient demon tomb, wanted to enter the Holy Emperor sect. The king of the capital god was wearing a white robe, which gave him a light and calm feeling, but this so-called Holy Emperor did look much more majestic. He was wearing a golden robe, and he was a young man with a look of oppression. His voice was low and he had irresistible authority and power. No wonder he could suppress the Chu family and support the Holy Emperor section. This was an absolute super emperor, the type who would kill millions of people if he got angry. Even if he didn't look at Zhang Zizai at all, ordinary people would feel oppressed by his strength and couldn't raise their heads when they looked at him. As his 9th disciple, Shen Xiao was now qualified to stand by his side. On his other side was his loser Chu Si, and Chu Si's younger brother Chu Yang was by another strong man. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Holy Dragon Totem. Author, Fengqing Yang. Chapter 885. Zhang Zizai glanced at the strong man, who was a middle-aged man with golden hair. The hair between his eyebrows was particularly fiery. The whole person was fiery and a little scary, and even showed some gloom. This person seemed more violent than the Holy Emperor, but he definitely did not have the orthodox aura of the Holy Emperor. In comparison, it was a bit like the difference between a lion and a dragon. The lion was fierce, but how could it be compared with a dragon? If Zhang Zizai guessed correctly, this was probably the second person in the Holy Emperor sect, the refining sun god, the current head of the Sun Chu family, who was only one step away from being a quasi-god king. Taiwan Novel Network rightward arrow dot. Now Chu Si and Shen Xiao are standing next to the Holy Emperor. There is not much, but Shen Xiao raised his head, clearly looking for Zhang Zizai in the team of the God King Palace. Zhang Zizai is in the corner, not easy to find, but after some effort, she still saw him. After seeing him, she smiled charmingly, and seemed to be relieved. Zhang Zizai suddenly felt a burning gaze burning on his face, just like a ball of fire hitting his face. Following this gaze, it turned out to be Chu Si, but when his eyes met with Zhang Zizai, he smiled slightly and dissolved the direct fire in the invisible Zheng. Zhang Zizai was too lazy to pay attention to him. He turned his eyes to the other side, which was the opposite side of the Holy Emperor Gate. Seeing that there were mostly women, he knew that these were the strong talents from the eternal night star sea. The eternal night sea of stars is full of stars, but the one who shines the brightest must be the strongest, the leader of the eternal night sea of stars, the quasi-god king eternal night star lord. She is a dreamy beauty who looks like she is only in her 20s, completely shrouded in starlight. Not only is she beautiful and unparalleled, but her temperament is also extremely noble and profound. Looking up at her, it is probably the same feeling as when Zhang Zizai looked up at the Xuanhuan first god. Both of them are much older than him, but they are still peerless beauties with stunning beauty. The reputation of the eternal night star lord must have lasted for tens of thousands of years. This is unquestionable. Although she is young, she is a figure of the same era as the Du Shen king. After the great waves, those of her generation are probably almost dead. Her beauty, coupled with the supreme status and the strength of the quasi-god king, that feeling looks completely different from Xuanhuan and the others. It is a noble, holy, eternal, and noble appearance that makes people dare not think too much. However, Zhang Zizai's mind was not on her. He just wanted to take a few more glances to confirm whether Lingxian was here. No matter how many times he looked, she was indeed not there. But next to the Lord of the Eternal Night, he saw a girl with the same stunning appearance. This girl was lively and cute, with a baby face. She clearly had an attractive figure of an adult, but had a very tender face. Her big eyes flickered flexibly, and she looked around curiously. She was very cute. Even in front of the Lord of the Eternal Night, her light never dimmed. Such a face and such a devilish figure comparable to Xuanyu reminded Zhang Zizai of Qi Yuan of the Origin Divine section. Although they were of the same type, there was indeed a difference between a grain of rice and a bright moon. The attention that this girl could attract from young disciples was almost no less than that of Xuanhuan beside the king of the capital god. Zhang Zizai was probably also a very top talent. She could be next to the Lord of the Eternal Night, which meant that she should be the first person under the ancient god of the Eternal Night Star Sea. Zhang Zizai recalled that Xuanhuan had briefly told him about the opponents he would meet this time. She said that it would be best for Zhang Zizai not to meet two of them. There was no benefit in fighting with them. One of them was Chu Ci from the Holy Emperor sect, and the other seemed to be Ji Yingying from the Eternal Night Star Sea. These two were the talents recognized as being similar to her before she became a god. Even their ages were similar. Then this lovely and charming girl should be Ji Yingying. After all, she looked soft and cute, and Zhang Zizai couldn't help but look at her a few more times. But according to Xuanhuan, she seemed difficult to deal with, especially her totem, which was said to be very scary. Xuanhuan said, but Zhang Zizai didn't remember it clearly. It seemed to be related to some black hole. Except for Ji Yingying, Zhang Zizai basically knew about the talents below the ancient gods. For example, Xuanhuan from the Forgotten River Sword Tomb and Zhang Shendao from the Daimo sect. Lu Dingxing and Xuanyu also came. Although Duan Mulian was the leader of the demon sect, he was the fourth or fifth in the Dao demon section. It seemed that he did not have a high status in the Dao demon sect, while Lu Dingxing looked very ordinary among a group of ordinary disciples. Xuanyu was different. He stood next to the Tire Sword Lord, and he looked like a core disciple of the Wangchuan Sword Tomb. Zhang Zizai saw the Tire Sword Lord again. This guy was ranked second in the Wangchuan Sword Tomb, but he was still sloppy. At this time, he was staring at the fine wine and delicacies in front of him. He was so focused that he squinted his eyes and smelled the aroma of the fine wine several times. He had already been tempted. The current ruler of the Wangchuan Sword Tomb is called Tai God King, also known as Tai Sword King. He was a young man with white eyebrows and white hair. At this time, he sat upright, as straight as a sword, with a restrained edge, which formed a sharp contrast with the Tire Sword Lord next to him. Xuanhuan, the daughter of Tai Sword King, was right next to him. At this moment, she was also sitting upright, with the demeanor of a swordsman. The fifth quasi-god king present was the leader of the Dao demon sect, named Dongyang Xiong, and his title was Dongyang God King. This person had a celestial bearing, was detached from the world, and was very extraordinary. He should be the oldest person present, and he was probably approaching the end of his life as a god king. If he didn't have the chance to become a god king, he might die at the end of his life. However, it seemed that Dongyang God King was still in high spirits, chatting and laughing with everyone. He had the demeanor of a great Dao. Their elders were all talking and waiting for the arrival of the God King. The younger generation was actually looking around like Zhang Zizai, but Zhang Zizai didn't look at Dongyang God King much. His eyes fell on Duan Mulian, the gravekeeper of the ancient demon tomb. He was actually searching for Zhang Zizai in the crowd. When he saw Zhang Zizai, Zhang Zizai felt the shock in his eyes. It was he who brought Zhang Zizai to the divine realm. At that time, he absolutely could not believe that Zhang Zizai could possess such status, position, and strength in such a short time. When he saw Zhang Zizai again, with his strength, he would definitely know at a glance what level Zhang Zizai was. Such changes and improvements were comparable to those of Lu Dingxing, who inherited the ancient demon tomb. He probably knew that he had definitely misjudged him. Holy Dragon Totem. Author, Fengqing Yang. Chapter 886. I remember that at that time, they were both 10 times stronger than themselves, Shen Xiao and Ling Xian, and Lu Dingxing's future was 100 times that of his own, but Zhang Zizai had to get to this point on his own. This pair of Duan Muli and Lai probably couldn't believe it, so much so that he looking at Zhang Zizai, his eyes were trembling. Zhang Zizai responded with a smile. Nowadays, those who can talk are at least above the level of Yu Shenjun, and others must know what they are talking about. At this time, the topic of their peak beings turned to their respective talents. For them, in fact, they can be considered young people under 1,000 years old, so Zhang Zizai and his group are considered the best. However, most of these people had never appeared at the God King's feast, so they naturally became the focus of the discussion. Among them, the daughters of the God King Du were naturally the focus of the topic. Remember the last feast of the God King, Yan Yu was just born, not long ago, and now your daughter Yu11 has become a god. Brother Du is now enjoying the blessings of everyone, which is enviable. The most unexpected thing is, Yu11 is only a teenager, and she has already become a god, which really surprises us. My disciple Chu Ci and I were almost the same as Yu11, but now we are going to be left behind, the Holy Emperor said. 11er is lucky and everything goes smoothly. Your 8th disciple has better qualifications than the other disciples and possesses the rare 9-sun totem. This is the pinnacle of the Chu family. Once you become a god, your future it's much easier than 11er. As for becoming a god, it's just a matter of opportunity, so there's no need to rush, Dushan King greeted. My disciple has heard about Yu11's name for a long time and wanted to compete with Yu11. But he didn't expect that Yu11 has become a god before the feast of the God King has come. There is no chance this time, Yanjai Star Master. He touched Ji Yingying's head and said with a loving look on his face. When she becomes a god, she can come to the God King Palace to find 11er at any time. People of the same age are all very talented, so they can naturally cherish each other. They may become sisters and friends, and they will be taken care of in their future cultivation journey, King Du Shen said with a smile. Later, Tai Sword King and Dongyang God King both said a few words. At this moment, Dushan King suddenly said, "Actually, young people, I recently heard that the 3 of you have found peerless talents in the totem world. It sounds really good. It's incredible that we have never paid attention to the totem world. I never thought that such a young character could appear in the totem world. It seems that there are 2 girls or sisters who went to the door and the Sea of Stars respectively. I wonder if they will be brought here this time. This is my 9th newly acquired disciple, one of your 2 children." The Holy Emperor glanced at Xiao Xiao and said, "Brother, you are right. He is so great that there are no surprises. This child's talent it has also greatly changed my view of the totem world, and we are going to pay more attention to the well of God's domain in the future, and our God's domain will be stronger in the future." They were all very polite in their words, and there was no trace of years of feuding. "It's really good, especially the soul, it's very special," King Dushan said. "Why didn't Star Master bring my disciple's sister? It seems that the sisters haven't talked about old times for a while," the Holy Emperor asked accidentally. "Ling Xian has special qualifications, and all her creations are in her blood, so I asked her to concentrate on seclusion and digging. She is now at a critical stage and can only miss the feast of the God King. However, her current progress is about the same as your disciple. To be honest, This several children from the Totem world really surprised me, but the most enviable ones are probably those from the Tai Sword King. Many disciples of the Xuanhuan sword tomb have dreamed of becoming the master of the Xuanhuan sword, but they never expected that, let a young man from the Totem world realize their dream. For a time, Xuanhuan next to Tai Sword Master became the focus of the gods. Everyone was very curious about the famous Xuanhuan sword master. Among the talents from the Totem world, Xuanhuan's name was the biggest. At present, judging from his creation, he is indeed the top one. With the forgotten sword, he can be different from all his peers. It only takes about half a year to go directly from the origin realm to becoming a god. The creation of Xuanhuan sword is indeed incredible. To be recognized by Xuanhuan sword, this child can basically become the supreme figure in the swordsmanship of God's domain in the future. It is really enviable. Dushan King smiled. At this point, there are not many Tai Sword King. As Xuanhuan's master, Tai Sword King said, God King, a talent in the Totem world, I remember that there is one in your God King palace. I have seen him before. This young man, he was almost recognized by the Xuanhuan sword. I thought I would never see him again. I just recently heard that my disciple actually met him in the God King palace. My disciple is very interested in your God King palace. I admire this guy very much. His name seems to be Zhang Zizai. When the name rang out, first of all, the eyes of the people around him fell on Zhang Zizai, and then they attracted the attention of other people. Because Tai Sword Lord is so weird, it aroused people's curiosity. Here, in the blink of an eye, Zhang Zizai suddenly became the focus of the Divine King's palace. When everyone looked at him in confusion and curiosity, a scream suddenly came from the direction of the Holy Emperor Gate, "Why is it you?" Everyone followed the voice and looked over. It turned out to be an ordinary divine king named Xuanhuan. He looked shocked. He probably didn't expect it at all, so he behaved in such a horrified manner. After all, he was just an ordinary divine king, and there was simply no place here. His words have no place. Of course Zhang Zizai knew him. He was the one who brought Shen Xiao to the Holy Emperor Gate and was the master of Chu Chen in the ancient demon tomb. He probably didn't pay much attention to the name Zhang Zizai, and only had such an expression when he saw him. After all, Zhang Zizai had completed all the tests, but he gave up on Zhang Zizai and thought that Cheng Xiao's talent was 10 times that of Zhang Zizai. Now, listening to everyone's description, and with his eyes as a god, he naturally saw that Zhang Zizai had reached a very high level in the initial god realm, so he was a little speechless. Xuanhuan's shocked face made people more interested in Zhang Zizai. "Why are you so out of control?" Shen Emperor glanced at Xuanhuan. Although his tone was not strong, his majesty existed. Xuanhuan hurriedly lowered his head and said, "Reply to Shen Emperor, when I brought Shen Xiao back, I also met this young man. He was not in the initial god realm at that time. I didn't see it at that time. He didn't go down. After all, it seemed a bit impolite to make Zhang Zizai look ordinary." Holy Dragon Totem. Author, Fengqing Yang. Chapter 887. At this time, someone from the Holy Emperor sect said a few words to the head of the Chu family, Lian Ri Shenjun. Lian Ri Shenjun nodded. Zhang Zizai noticed this detail. If his estimate was correct, it should be that Xuanhuan had roughly understood Chu Chen's affairs after returning. However, an ordinary generation was not enough for Lian Ri Shenjun to bring this matter out. Xuanhuan had made great contributions in bringing back Shen Xiao, and the death of Chu Chen would not cause any waves. The Holy Emperor also noticed Zhang Zizai because of this. He asked, "This young man from the Totem world seems to have made great progress. It seems that Brother Du has also put in a lot of effort." The Du Shenwang smiled and did not answer, because he did not pay much attention to it at all. "That's natural. I just heard a few days ago that this guy and the Du Shenhuang's daughter have mutual feelings for each other. Maybe the Du Shenhuang is training him as a son-in-law. Tai Erg smiled. His words were a bit thoughtless. After all, he didn't know what the Du Shenhuang thought about this matter. After saying this, many people observed the Du Shenhuang's reaction. If he denied it, it would mean that Zhang Zizai's talent was not at that level. If he affirmed it, it would definitely mean that this young man was definitely a treasure. Just as people were waiting for the response from the God King, suddenly, the atmosphere in the God King's palace changed completely. At some point, a person sat on the top seat. He did not appear in a dazzling manner, and there was not even a sound. He suddenly appeared in that position while everyone was still chatting, as if he had always been there. In just that moment, the entire God King's palace suddenly became solemn and dignified. The gods reacted quickly. They stood up one after another, bowed their hands to the man, and led by the quasi-god kings, with their disciples and others, they said in unison, "We greet the God King and welcome the God King to come." The voices were extremely neat and kept echoing in the God King's palace. The arrival of the God King was too sudden, and Zhang Zizai himself was a little slow to react. He could only follow the people around him to salute. At this time, everyone lowered their heads and dared not look directly at the God King. Zhang Zizai naturally could not raise his head, which would definitely be very conspicuous. He was actually very shocked. The arrival of this God King was silent and there was no movement at all, but at the moment of his appearance, it seemed that everyone had a kind of pressure. If you feel this pressure carefully, you will feel a breathless feeling, but you don't know where this pressure comes from, as if the whole land has changed. No need to be polite. Welcome everyone. Please take a seat at this time, a special voice echoed in the God King's holy palace. This voice was low and heavy. It seemed very ordinary at first. It was the voice of a young man, but it was long and far-reaching. However, Zhang Zizai heard a special feeling in this voice. Why did he feel a little familiar? There are thousands of people in this world, but their voices seem to be different. Some voices will be imprinted in the mind after hearing them many times, and the next time you hear them, you can immediately fit them together. Such a familiar voice, but it seems that I haven't heard it for a while, which makes Zhang Zizai feel a little strange. At this time, Zhang Zizai found that the gods and quasi-gods had already taken their seats. Many young people who had never seen the God King dared to raise their heads and look at this supreme existence. Zhang Zizai also raised his head. In that position, sat a young man who looked very ordinary. His temperament was so ordinary that it seemed incomparable to the talents present. This was simply the most ordinary person on the streets of the great Zhongqing city. He didn't even have a little martial arts breath, and it seemed that he didn't even exist between here and there. Ordinary, gentle, without the temperament of the so-called king of the gods. However, even if it was his profile that I saw at first glance, it was too familiar. The degree of familiarity was so great that Zhang Zizai almost cried out after recognizing his appearance. The appearance of the king of all living things made Zhang Zizai's heart tremble countless times. He hadn't reacted for at least 10 breaths. Unable to breathe. He was too familiar with this person. His voice also overlapped with the person Zhang Zizai was most familiar with in his life. He was Zhang Zizai's brother, Zhang Junjian. That's right, whether it was the voice or the temperament and face, everything was exactly the same. The person sitting on the throne of the King of Gods didn't look like Zhang Junjian, he was Zhang Junjian himself. No one could be so similar, even the feeling between the gestures was exactly the same. This was not a question of similarity at all. The only difference might be that Zhang Junjian was close to the initial god realm, but the one in front of him looked like a complete mortal. Zhang Zizai was trembling and almost cried out. It was such a God King holy palace that made him hold back such an impulse. From beginning to end, Zhang Junjian didn't look at him, as if he didn't know he existed, so he resisted the urge. After all, he was more important. This existence was definitely the God King. He was the God King first, and then Zhang Junjian. He still had doubts about his eyes, so he thought he might have seen it wrong. He blinked many times in a row, but in the end he found that Zhang Junjian's face had not changed at all. Zhang Zizai remembered something. When the God King saw him for the first time, he seemed to be a little similar to a certain existence. In fact, of course the two brothers look similar. They are both God Kings. Maybe it is because he is similar to the God King. His mood could not calm down for a long time. He chose to continue watching. At this time, the King of the Gods had already picked up the wine glass. As long as there was a seat, everyone would pick up the wine glass at this time and respect the God King. Welcome everyone. I haven't seen you for a while. You are all well. The God King and everyone finished the drink in one gulp, and then said, "The God King is welcome. It is our honor to see the God King again." Even the Holy Emperor and others were slightly nervous when speaking in front of the God King, let alone others. Everyone still behaves as usual. There is no need to meet outsiders. Today's banquet is a gathering of friends from the God's realm. There is no need to be restrained. Let's eat and chat at the same time. This is the joy of life. Unexpectedly, this God King has no heirs at all. Invisibly, many young people are full of affection for him, but Zhang Zizai is even more puzzled. Isn't the way of saying this exactly the same as Zhang Junjian? My brother is the God King, and then he works part-time as the emperor in the origin continent. Zhang Zizai was speechless. He was speechless and almost speechless. However, he still couldn't believe it. The current explanation is that this God King has nothing to do with Zhang Junjian. Maybe are there really people who look exactly the same everywhere? Maybe, it is possible. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Holy Dragon Totem. Author, Fengqing Yang. Chapter 888. As a person who is equivalent to a baby in the eyes of the gods, he naturally has no right to speak in normal circumstances. I hope readers will remember our domain name Taiwan Novel Network rightward arrow diamond suit. Zhang Zizai can only watch, not more, because he is not sure. Imagine, if this God King and Zhang Junjian have nothing to do with each other, and he rashly recognizes him, it would be a big joke. So, he chose to calm his excited and shocked mood, and then observe in detail. Anyway, he will go to the battle after all, and the God King will see him after all, and then he will just have to see his reaction. So he chose to observe in silence. Next, when people did not dare to look directly at the God King, Zhang Zizai was in the corner, staring at the God King. He knew that Shen Xiao and Lu Dingxing must have the same feelings as him. They all knew Zhang Junjian. Now when they looked at each other, when they found that his eyes were also full of doubts, they were also full of doubts about the true identity of the God King. Or, he was full of doubts about Zhang Junjian's identity. The God King must be the God King. But Zhang Junjian may not be just Zhang Junjian. At this time, the protagonists of the God King's palace mainly reported to the God King the subtle changes in the God realm over the years. The God King listened carefully and occasionally gave some opinions. Even some God Kings had obstacles in their cultivation, and the God King would help to solve them. This occasion was a bit like the meeting between the monarch and his ministers in the mortal world. Naturally, he was a wise monarch, so he was so popular. For example, the Holy Emperor, the capital God King and others all respected the God King and regarded him as a senior. Through their conversation, Zhang Zizai also found that the God King was upright and strict. In addition to his appearance and voice that shocked Zhang Zizai, he was actually completely in line with his current identity. In other words, after seeing more, Zhang Zizhe would gradually think that all this was really just a similarity in appearance. This feeling became stronger and stronger. When he meets any one of the three of me, Shenxiao and Panda, if there is no special reaction, it means that he and my brother really have nothing to do with each other. Zhang Zizhe was a little impatient. Time passed, and after 3 rounds of drinking, the king of the capital god asked, "King of the capital god, there are some new generations born in this period, and there are many promising guys among them. How about letting them fight to liven up the atmosphere according to the old rules?" "You can arrange it," the king of the capital god nodded. The king of the capital god responded and said to the crowd, "All the generations that meet the requirements can now go to the fighting god arena to fight. Everyone knows the rules. Remember that friendship comes first and fighting comes second." The fighting rules of the king of the capital feast are relatively simple. As long as 2 people are attracted to each other, they can fight on one of the 9 arenas. There is no ranking. You just need to show yourself through the right opponent. The king of the capital god can see through what achievements you have made at a glance. Finally, it has come to this stage. Many people are still eager to show themselves in front of the king of the capital god and the powerful people. After the king of all gods finished speaking, the king of all gods suddenly looked around and said, "This time it's a little special. I will select 1 to 3 people. As long as they meet my requirements, I will give them the opportunity to become real god kings in the future. It should be guaranteed that they can reach the level of quasi-god kings." When this sentence came out, even the king of all gods beside him flashed a trace of shock in his eyes. The king of gods has never made such a decision at the king of gods feast. Just this sentence makes this king of gods feast completely different from the past. It can even be said that it is not a concept at all. In the past, it was just a gift, or a god-level totem weapon, or an evolution source, or a battle tactic, or it could be an inheritance, which is already a very good reward. The treasures from the king of gods cannot be simple. But this time is different. What the king of gods said is that he will select 1 to 3 people and give them the opportunity to become real god kings. The real god king is like himself. Even after getting this opportunity, even the quasi-god king is the minimum. The meaning of this, anyone can go crazy and excited when thinking about it. This is definitely an opportunity to ascend in one step. Who among us doesn't want to become the true king of gods and dominate the universe? It sounds like the god king wants to select his successor. As long as he is selected, his status in the entire god realm may be extraordinary. Zhang Zizhe found that the children of the gods around him were boiling, and their eyes instantly became extremely fanatical. But there are also dim people, that is, the group of people who just exceeded the age. There are also absolute talents among them. Now they are about 100 years old and close to becoming gods, but they no longer have this opportunity. The God King obviously wants to choose from the youngest group of people, perhaps to train them personally. This sentence sounds like the God King is going to recruit disciples personally. Even if he doesn't want to be a master, the effect should be the same. As long as they are young, whether they have become gods or not, they have a chance. Xuanhuan is only in her 20s. She also has a chance this time. The 2 daughters of the God King have become popular candidates for a while. The God King did not announce this news until today, which seemed like a bolt from the blue, causing the entire God King palace to boil, and everyone's blood almost boiled. People who are familiar with the God King know that he will not say a word twice. Since he has already said it in such an occasion, there is no need to confirm it again and again. This is already a decision that has been announced. Then the kids really have to perform at their best. Du Xuanhuan laughed dumbly. The atmosphere of the previous God King banquet was quite relaxed, but this time, it seemed that it was not relaxed anymore. Du Xuanhuan used the word perform at their best to vividly describe the mood of young people nowadays. Just perform normally, God King said. Just perform normally. With his vision, he can see where the potential is at a glance. The atmosphere suddenly became depressing because there were too many eager people. At this time, Du Shenhuang signaled that the young people could come on stage. He raised his wine glass and led the guests to respect the God King. In their harmonious chat, some young people had already stepped onto the fighting god arena to accept the challenge of their opponents. As long as someone comes on stage, he can directly choose his opponent. As long as both of them agree, they can start a war regardless of the realm gap. In the past, the God King banquet was conducted in a friendly exchange mode, but this time it was more asterisk and seemed particularly tense. Holy Dragon Totem. Author, Fengqing Yang. Chapter 889. The God King's eyes were calm, and this scrutinizing look actually made the seniors more nervous. The God King's banquet lasted for a while, so key figures were often not in a hurry to go on stage, they wanted to wait and see. Zhang Zizai was of course not in a hurry either. There were a total of 9 arenas, and the battle started soon. Basically, opponents with similar strength would decide to fight. If the difference was too big, it would be meaningless for both of them. The higher realm defeated the lower realm and could not show themselves, and the lower realm also could not show themselves, so most people knew that there was no need to waste time and energy. There was no ranking for this fight. The God King watched the process of the battle. Even if 2 people in the 5th level of the initial God realm were fighting, in fact, as long as there was something surprising, the God King would notice it. At the beginning, there were several battles between mortals. There were not many highlights, because none of them were top talents. At present, there were more than 30 truly outstanding figures in the God King's holy palace, including ancient gods and mortals, who had not yet appeared. Soon the battle ended, leaving the God fighting arena empty. Since the battle began, the God King basically did not speak on his own initiative. He was watching very seriously, so no one dared to disturb him. The focus of the entire God King feast shifted to the 9 fighting god arenas. This was indeed different from before. In the past, the God King and the ministers enjoyed the disciples fighting and increased the fun of drinking and chatting. It was because of the solemnity that it seemed serious, and the importance of the opportunity to be selected was even more apparent. After fighting for about an hour, the scene finally became thrilling, and talents at the level of ancient gods had already gone up. At this time, a woman from the Holy Emperor Gate was waiting to go up to the fighting god arena. She looked like she had just reached adulthood, and her age should not be too old. After going up on stage, she introduced herself. My name is Xuanhuan, from the Holy Emperor Gate. I am 31 years old today. I became a god 3 years ago, and I have now reached the 2nd level of the ancient god realm. She was relatively polite and careful, and she knew how to introduce herself to the God King on stage. Becoming a god at the age of 31, her talent is already very good. I heard that Xuanhuan, the daughter of the King of the Gods, became a god at the age of 17. She is very talented. Today, I will be a supporting role and would like to challenge Miss Su. I wonder if Miss Su is willing to fight. Her talent is definitely not as good as Xuanhuan's, and her realm is 1 level higher. In fact, she must know that she will not have much chance in this battle, so if she challenges a famous figure, she may be able to attract some attention from the King of the Gods. If she loses, it will be a favor to the King of the Gods. If she wins, she can also become famous. She knows that Xuanhuan should agree, because Xuanhuan's peers are not her opponents, so she can only choose someone older. With Xuanhuan's pride, perhaps opponents of the same level will not look down on her. Sure enough, Xuanhuan stood up, rushed to the god fighting arena, and said, I accept. When she was not with Zhang Zizai, she acted like a princess, arrogant and domineering, and very straightforward. The battle between Xuanhuan and Xuanhuan could be the first explosive point of the God King feast. Almost no one paid attention to the other battles that took place at the same time. After all, Xuanhuan was a person who had great hope of being valued by the God King, especially considering the relationship between her father and the God King. Her possibility could be the highest in the whole venue. How could her battle not cause turmoil? When the two were ready to fight, the God King looked at Xuanhuan and said to the God King, "You are lucky. You are so old, and you still have a pair of such good daughters. It's really enviable. You are lucky, but you need to worry about both," the God King said. The God King looked at Xuanhuan and said, "This daughter is not bad. She can become a god at this age, which is much better than you were back then. What is commendable is that she was born in a wealthy family, but she has a tenacious will to become a god." Hearing his praise, he must have a good opinion of Xuanhuan, and the God King felt relieved. He actually knew that at least among her peers, Xuanhuan was ahead of Chu Ci and Ji Yingying, so she should have a great chance. Of course, it also depends on whether she can do her best. The battle between Xuanhuan and Xuanhuan is about to start. She is one realm lower, but she has the god-level totem Eternal Supreme God City Totem and the Supreme Tebe Sword. After becoming a god, she began to practice the god-level battle tactics, and has made a lot of progress so far. Xuanhuan has been a god for many years, and he is definitely better than Xuanhuan in the experience of using the ancient god source power, but this is not a battle based on experience. The battle between ancient gods is more brutal and magnificent, and Xuanhuan's fighting style is actually also a brutal type, with a long sword that is invincible. In this battle, she suppressed Xuanhuan from the beginning. In less than 20 breaths, Xuanhuan retreated directly and was not her opponent at all. She had just become a god, and she had already surpassed a realm and crushed her opponent. Such performance directly caused a burst of envious noise, especially the young people in the God King Palace, who couldn't help cheering for her. 11 is really amazing, and she is even more amazing after becoming a god. Yun Zhao was excited. Such a 11 is not worthy of some cats and dogs, Lin Zihan added. Yun Zhao had a headache. She could only stand farther away and lean towards Zhang Zizai, because she knew that it was Xuanhuan who pursued Zhang Zizai from beginning to end, not Zhang Zizai who entangled her. The daughter of the God King is really amazing. Once she became a god, she is really extraordinary. She has the style of Brother Du in the past, and is more like Brother Du than Brother Du's eldest daughter. Xuanhuan's performance attracted the praise of some top figures. Even the King of Gods nodded and said, "This opponent can't show her strength. Change to a more challenging one next time." Xuanhuan had already returned at this time. When she heard the praise from the King of Gods, she was actually surprised and excited. She nodded obediently. After standing beside her father, she quietly looked at Zhang Zizai. After meeting Zhang Zizai's eyes, she made a face. Even Xuanhuan went to fight, and many people couldn't hold back. At this time, the Holy Emperor said to the King of Gods, "King of Gods, I have accepted a disciple in the Totem world recently." Before, she had just reached the realm of the Source Realm. After less than a year of training, she has reached the 5th level of the initial God realm. King of Gods can pay attention to her special aspects of the soul. He personally recommended Shen Xiao, which was very responsible, because Shen Xiao's situation was special. She was at this level at her age, which was nothing here. Naturally, he had to remind her that she was from the Totem world, so that she could show her potential. Following his recommendation, the God King set his sights on Shen Xiao, who was beside him. Holy Dragon Totem. Author, Fengqing Yang. Chapter 890. At this moment, Zhang Zizai was excited. He carefully observed the expression of the God King. If he really had a relationship with Zhang Junjian, then his expression would definitely change after he saw Shen Xiao. This was a very important moment for Zhang Zizai. Even Shen Xiao himself was a little nervous. She was wondering if Zhang Zizai's brother could recognize her. If it was Zhang Junjian, he must be very familiar with her. After all, when she went to the great Zhongqing city, although Zhang Junjian didn't play with her, he at least knew her. Everything was revealed at this moment. The answer Zhang Zizai got was that when Zhang Junjian looked at Shen Xiao, he had an expression that he didn't know Shen Xiao at all. He didn't have any special surprise, but said, it should be that he got some kind of inheritance in the totem world, which is quite interesting. Although the first half of his life has been wasted so far, he can catch up in a year. It shows that he has great potential in the future. He analyzed calmly, but he didn't have any other thoughts about Shen Xiao and his appearance. It seemed to be clearer that he had no relationship with Zhang Junjian. After the Holy Emperor was recognized, he smiled and asked Shen Xiao to perform. As a result, Shen Xiao did not disappoint him. She defeated 2 opponents from the God King Palace and the Eternal Night Star Sea in succession. The opponent from the Eternal Night Star Sea was 1 realm higher than her, but he crushed and defeated them all. It seems that her ultimate combat power should be above the 7th level of the initial God realm. Zhang Ziyi only knew at this moment that the holy dragon armor she got from Xuanhuan was actually a divine totem weapon. No wonder she was so domineering. Shen Xiao, wearing the holy dragon armor, was simply a female war god. She killed gods and fought 2 consecutive games on the god fighting arena. It was the Holy Emperor who asked her to go back and rest and give the opportunity to perform to others. She stopped. Anyway, there will be many opportunities to perform next. In the future, there will be a chance to climb above the peak of the God King. This is the evaluation of Shen Xiao by the God King. It sounds like he quite recognizes Shen Xiao. The number of places for the God King is 1 to 3, not 3 for sure. This shows that he must have very high requirements, which means that he will at least choose 1 person, but if the others really do not meet his expectations, he may only choose 1 person. Even, maybe no one will be chosen. So far, no one knows what the standard of the God King is. The battle in the God fighting arena is still going on. The God Kings of all parties also brought many disciples to perform. 9 arenas were held at the same time. Even so, after half a day, many people still did not go on stage. In the past, the God King feast would last for several days, so those who were not in a hurry were still not in a hurry. Zhang Zizai had not found a suitable opponent, so he was also not in a hurry. He was still thinking about why the God King looked exactly like his brother. At this time, an acquaintance walked onto the God fighting arena in the spotlight. This was a woman in a white sword robe, with a waterfall-like long hair hanging straight down. She had a cold face, and she seemed to have no emotions. Around her body, there was a faint smoke and dust surrounding her, which made her temperament outstanding. Such a cold beauty naturally attracted people's attention. She was the daughter of Tai God King, Xuanhuan from Wangchuan Sword Tomb. At her age, she should be ranked in the top 5 in the entire God realm. She was not much different from Xuanhuan, and she was considered a candidate with many prospects. So when she went up, she naturally attracted some attention. Even the ancient gods fighting in the 2 fighting arenas lost their focus for a while. Meet the God King, my name is Xuanhuan, I am 18 years old this year. She saluted very appropriately and introduced herself. This is my daughter Tai God King introduced to the King of Gods. You are the same as you. Both of you are very lucky. The God King nodded slightly and asked Xuanhuan again, whoever you want to fight, just go and fight. After Xuanhuan went up, it seemed that no one went up to fight for a while. The strength span above the ancient gods is very large, but there is a limit below the ancient gods. As the strongest few people below the ancient gods, even the 9th level of the initial god realm in his 40s is not Xuanhuan's opponent, and she can't challenge the ancient gods, so her opponents are actually limited. So her battle is actually more interesting than Xuanhuan, because Xuanhuan has many opponents. Normally, Xuanhuan might challenge talents other than Suyuexi in the God King Palace, such as Lin's Hekan. Or Chu Ci and Chu Yang from the Holy Emperor sect, or Zhang Shendao from the Daimo section. In addition, those god lords who came as individuals also brought several young talents who met three conditions. First, the 9th level of the initial god realm; second, under 20 years old; third, god lord level totem. Who Xuanhuan will fight has become a suspense. When everyone thought she would choose an opponent in front, she suddenly turned around and looked in the direction of the Wangchuan sword tomb, saying, "I want to challenge Xuanyu, I don't know if you have the courage." During this period of time, Xuanyu's name can be heard throughout the entire god realm. This is simply a synonym for luck. The Wangchuan sword master who has not appeared in countless years, a person who came from the totem world in one step, is enough to make countless people in the god realm envious. He had never left the Wangchuan sword tomb, but he was already famous, even surpassing Xuanhuan, who was the first talent under the ancient god of Wangchuan sword tomb. There were not many people who challenged his sect in the history of the God King feast. It seemed that Tai Sword King was somewhat unprepared for her decision. But people can clearly feel why she did this, because she was unwilling, because she was not convinced. She wanted to challenge Wangchuan sword, to prove that maybe she was more suitable for Wangchuan sword, maybe Wangchuan sword would not recognize her, but at least she wanted to prove to the subordinates that she should be more qualified. The girl's proud heart did not come out, but how could so many top beings present not guess? In the solemn eyes of Xuanhuan, Xuanyu, who was standing next to Tire Sword Lord, glanced at Tire Sword Lord. "It's nothing, but don't hurt my knees, master, I still want to match you." Tire Sword Lord laughed. Understood. Xuanyu walked out, saluted Tai God King first, and then walked to the Dushan arena. "How is Kinyu's progress?" Tai God King asked. "Brother, you will know when you see it." Tire Sword Lord laughed. "Don't look at Yanner either," Tai God King said. "Brother, you will know when you see it." "Really?" Tire Sword Lord continued to laugh. His frivolous expression makes people want to beat him up. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Holy Dragon Totem. Author, Fengqing Yang. Chapter 891. For some reason, the battle between young people from the same sect seemed more interesting than the battle between different forces. When Xuanyu and Xuanhuan stood face to face, the attention attracted by this battle arena was much more than that of other ongoing battles. Those people could only complain bitterly. It was not easy for them to get their turn. Who would want to be robbed of the limelight? Moreover, 3 of them were battles between ancient gods. In terms of the excitement of the battles, they must have surpassed the 2 people from Wangchuan sword tomb. After today, maybe Wangchuan sword will understand that you are not worthy of it. Xuanhuan drew out her sword. It was a 3-foot green blade, hard and sharp. It was not a god-level totem weapon, proving that Xuanhuan had not reached the level that Suyuexi had once reached. However, her totem was definitely a god-level totem, named, Endless Smoke and Dust Sword Totem. "Senior Sister Yun, I know you don't recognize me. In fact, I don't want to be your opponent, because I never want brothers to fight. But now I think I have to let you give up this idea, so that there will be better development in the future," Xuanyu said calmly. Until now, people only know that Xuanyu is the 8th level of the initial god realm, but no one has ever seen him take action. For the first public appearance of the legend of the Wangchuan sword, many people are indeed paying attention. Take out the Wangchuan sword. Xuanhuan held the long sword and was already taking action. In fact, she seemed to crush Xuanyu in all aspects, except for the difference in weapons. "As you wish." Once Xuanyu entered the battle, the whole person was as sharp as a magic sword. He took out the supreme Wangchuan sword of the god realm from the space jade pendant. It was actually difficult to see too many special features of the dim yellow longsword. It was only when Xuanhuan held the longsword that it was obvious that he and the Wang Chuan sword had merged into one. At this moment, he had become the Wang Chuan sword itself, which was beyond the level of ordinary people. Today I will let you understand that weapons are always external things. Only your own cultivation is the eternal strength. Xuanhuan's eyes were cold. She had unfolded the divine power of the totem. The so-called endless smoke and dust was the sandstorm surrounding her at this moment. The sandstorm swept around her like smoke and dust, but in fact, if you look closely, you will know that it is not sand and gravel that is violently rolling, but micro-swords. There are millions of micro-swords sweeping around her. Under her mind, it is enough to tear everything apart. It has to be said that such totem divine power is definitely above the level of God Lord. A totem ability can penetrate thousands of troops. She is not controlling a sandstorm, but a sword storm. Such a huge momentum really amazed the elders. The ability shown by Xuanhuan at this time is worthy of her status as the first person under the ancient god of Wang Chuan sword tomb. Now she uses the sword to perform sword tactics, covering the ground and suppressing Xuanhuan. 9,000 swords of the mortal world. In the storm of swords, a graceful woman danced with a sword. The sword was like the rolling red dust, as if there were countless stories and years. These connotations were integrated into the sword art, showing a more extraordinary artistic conception. This move can definitely be described as stunning. Under this pressure, Xuanhuan seemed to be a nouveau riche holding a peerless treasure, and seemed to be completely crushed. In fact, it was normal for him to be crushed. After all, he was one level lower in realm, and he came from the totem world, so his foundation must be very shallow. It was not easy to catch up with Xuanhuan, so even if he was defeated, he could still bear it. But, was he willing to lose? At this moment, he just did something insignificant. Draw the sword, and do it in one go. The Wang Chuan sword, with one sword out, the chaos of hell, covering the sun. This quiet sword turned into a dazzling light, and in the dull eyes of people, it tore the red dust 9,000 swords into two halves with the most terrifying momentum. Whoosh! Xuanhuan disappeared. The next moment, he appeared in front of Xuanhuan, with the Wang Chuan sword already against her snow-white throat, drawing a drop of blood. The end of this battle was much faster than everyone imagined. When people saw where Xuanhuan's Wang Chuan sword was, the entire Divine King Palace was silent. Sister, thank you for letting me. Xuanhuan put away the Wang Chuan sword, turned around, and returned to the front of Tai sword lord without saying anything more. She stood upright, unperturbed by praise or criticism. Xuanhuan was left standing there in a daze, and after a long time, the sword in her hand fell on Lin. She thought she could easily crush Xuanhuan. She thought he was just a lucky guy, a farmer who picked up a sword and didn't know how to use it at all. But at the moment of the battle, she saw a will that made her despair and fear. Yes, the sword will is higher than the strength. It is rare that a person can suppress the sword, rather than the sword controlling the person. Yes. In this dead silence, the voice of the God King was very dazzling. He started with the word yes and ended with the word yes, showing his appreciation for Xuanhuan's performance at the moment. In the past, he would reward such praise on the spot. Congratulations to the God King Tai, the Wang Chuan sword tomb is about to produce a peerless figure. The God King do congratulated. To be honest, he did not expect that the rumored young man from the totem world who was recognized by the Wang Chuan sword could have such a shocking performance today. The will of that sword can be moving. The key is purity. Many people have not seen such pure sword intent. Although this sword intent is weak, it is as pure as snow. Once it grows up, it is absolutely terrifying. Tai God King looked calm. He asked Xuanhuan to go back, and then said to King Dushan, "This child is indeed good, but there is still a long way to go in the future. After all, he has been wasted in the totem world for too many years. He still needs guidance from House Hung. Don't be complacent. Yes, Xuanhuan knew that the second half was a warning to herself, so she nodded. Next to him, Xuanhuan lowered his head, feeling lost. Mu Yan, listen to Uncle. Lord Tiresword came up and said with a smile, don't hate this kid. Your father and I have dreamed about Wang Chuan sword countless times, but in the end we both understood that once if you are not the right person, still thinking about him will only end your future. You must think about it. Some people are just lucky and you can't help it. However, he thinks this kid has a pure mind. As long as you understand him better, you won't hate him. Maybe I can still do it in the future, haha. Go away, don't be blind. Tai Sword King glared at him, then gently patted his daughter on the shoulder and said, it's time to figure it out. Yes, Dad. In the past, she really looked down on Xuanhuan. But now I see that this silent young man has such a terrifying will. Is it really just luck that he got the Wang Chuan sword? While she was still thinking, her acquaintance had already appeared. Dao Demon Sect, Zhang Shendao. After seeing Xuanhuan's performance, he became a little impatient. His target is in the direction of the God King's palace, and now, he has locked onto a person in the God King's palace. Holy Dragon Totem. Author, Fengqing Yang. Chapter 892. Although this feast of the God King is seen as a rookie pecking each other in the eyes of the top experts, it is actually quite exciting because of the high stakes involved. Especially the scene where the two men from the Wang Chuan sword tomb were fighting from the same sect just now was quite interesting. The first performance of the Wang Chuan sword master was quite amazing. Because of this, some people can't hold it any longer. Zhang Shendao appeared at this time. As the first disciple of Dao Demon Sect, he attracted more attention than some ordinary ancient gods. The Dao Demon Sect was once brilliant, but now it can barely be regarded as the worst among the top forces. When Zhang Shendao obviously wants to challenge the strongest disciple of the God King Palace, it will obviously make people more curious. As we all know, after Xuanhuan became a god, not many people could stand up and support the show. The current record of the Temple of the God King is very good at the realm of Ancient God and above, but below the Ancient God, the winning rate is indeed very low. In the midst of everyone's attention, Zhang Shendao locked Zhang Zizai in the crowd and said, the Wang Chuan sword master who came from the totem world just now performed amazingly. It seems that the talents from the totem world who can come to the god's domain are not easy. Recently, Zhang Zizai of the Divine King Palace is famous. As one of the people who is very curious about his strength, I wonder if Brother Zhang is interested in fighting with me. Zhang Zizai didn't know why he was targeting him. Maybe it was because when he was with Xuanhuan and when Xuanhuan was defeated by Xuanhuan, he wanted to defeat him and give Xuanhuan a counterattack. However, he was interested in fighting against Zhang Shendao's opponent. It's just that the focus of this matter is not on the battle. When everyone's eyes fell on him, Zhang Zizai looked at the God King a little unnaturally. Sure enough, the God King paid attention to him. At that moment, Zhang Zizai's eyes and there was a collision between them. Zhang Zizai was extremely excited. Will his brother recognize him? In the next moment, his excitement was over, because the God King's face was still cold. After seeing him, there seemed to be no fluctuation at all. It was completely as if he saw a stranger. Then he picked up the wine glass and gently drank it himself. Drink it all in one gulp. The imagined brotherly meeting didn't happen, everything was over as soon as it started. Zhang Zizai froze for a moment. He must be a little disappointed with this result, but it didn't matter to him. After all, if his brother was really the God King, then what fun would there be in fighting in life? Brother Zhang, if you dare to fight, you can give me away. If you don't want to, I won't force you. Zhang Shendao saw that he didn't move and sneered in his heart, So he added. It seemed that Zhang Zizai didn't dare to challenge him, and many disdainful looks came his way. Zhang Zizai, no turtles are allowed to appear in the God King's palace, Lin Zikan said coldly from the side. After Zhang Zizai reacted, he was about to go down, but at this time he saw someone coming out from the opposite side, and he said, Zhang Shendao, you are not qualified to be my opponent, this time I will arrange for my brother to fight you. While this sentence made people feel funny, it also made people confused. Until people saw that a tall and burly young man with short hair actually jumped onto the God of War ring where Zhang Shendao was. For a moment, the battle god arena shook. Who is this? I haven't seen him before. He seems to be from Dao Demon section. Judging from his clothes, he is a disciple of Dao Demon section. Nobody. When this young man appeared, not many people even in the Dao Demon sect knew him. Zhang Shendao looked back and recognized this person. He was the Dao Demon sect disciple who was with Zhang Zizai and Xuanhuan. He remembered that Xuanhuan admired this person at that time, which made him laugh. Zhang Zizai was his brother, and Minjai might have come from the Totem world. Go back coming out to cause trouble at this time made Zhang Shendao feel a little bad. He wanted to challenge Zhang Zizai. He defeated an unknown soldier from his Dao Demon sect, and it was of no use to him. What responded to him was Lu Dingxing's oppressive eyes. His left eye was full of bloodshot eyes, and the bloodshot eyes even covered the left half of his face. At this moment, a surge of demonic energy burst out from his body. What a heavy amount of demonic energy! People were slightly amazed. There were all top powerhouses present. When this young man showed his power, they could all tell at a glance that he was definitely a hidden talent. Dong Yang, these are my disciples, let them try it. At this moment, Duan Mulian, the leader of the demon sect who had been silent all this time, suddenly said. The Dongyang God King of Dao sect narrowed his eyes. He felt that this matter was not very simple. He had never thought that on such an occasion, Duan Mulian, who was almost ignored by people, would actually take out a disciple, and he would be as good as Xuanhuan. Like Yun Weian, he targeted his disciples. Everyone knows the current situation of Dao Demon section. When Duan Mulian said these words, it meant that Dongyang God King could not refuse, otherwise he would lose face. It is even understandable that this is a challenge from the demon sect to the authority of the Dao sect, and it is difficult for the Dongyang God King not to accept it. Although you are a member of our Dao Demon sect, you and Brother Zhang are considered brothers. Since you have taken the lead for him, then I will help you. But please ask Zhang Zizai, if I defeat him, will I be qualified to compete with a peerless talent like you? What? Zhang Shendao's current question was full of provocation. Barely, Zhang Zizai said with a smile. Your words are enough. Zhang Shendao nodded and smiled. When his eyes shifted to Lu Dingxing, they had completely turned cold. He knew that this was a challenge from the demon section. He not only had to win, but also had to win beautifully. In his heart, the demon sect was dead and there was no need for it to exist. If it wanted to revive, it would have to be completely extinguished. It was another very interesting duel, and it even involved the grievances within the Dao Demon section. It was full of highlights. For a while, many gods focused their attention on these two people. Duan Mulian is really patient. He didn't make any moves before, and I didn't hear that he had any disciples, but suddenly one appeared. It seems that he has made some preparations for today. So he should have some confidence in this guy. It can be seen that his realm should be around the 8th level of the initial god realm, and his realm should not be as good as Zhang Shendao. I just don't know if he has other means. How come this young man has such strength and has not been discovered before? I guess Duan Mulian helped him hide his strength. It's a bit like bearing humiliation and sleeping on straw and tasting gall. Amid people's discussions, the orthodox Taoist Zhang Shendao has already taken action.